season for the Denver Broncos in regards to legitimizing themselves, after the Russell Wilson trade and, having a guy like Jerry Jeudy step up, Tim Patrick, getting the offense put together and, making sure that the overall continuity of this defense maintained. So it's a big year for the Denver Broncos. And obviously we've known who their opponents are going to be for quite some time, but now we know the order in which they're going to be played. We'll go game by game here, but what's kind of your initial thoughts? I saw you put out some tweets yesterday on Twitter. What do you make of the Broncos schedule as a whole?
Well, I think, all circumstances considered, I think it's a pretty tough schedule on paper, right? And I think, I've seen the opinion be like, oh, yeah, they got such a great schedule. They were gifted. I've seen some people say they're gifted the first 4 weeks of the season, but it's like if we're basing all of that on last year, that's always the false assumption people always make, right? It's like, oh, they look at it based on last year. Every single team in the NFL is different every single year, right? Teams that were bad maybe last year could be good this year. Teams that were good this year could be bad next year. For example, let's take the Rams. A couple years ago, they won the Super Bowl. Next year, bang, out of the playoffs entirely. Didn't even make it, right? So that's just where the NFL is. It's ebbs and flows. Teams ride the wave. They experience the peak, then they fall off into the valley a little bit. I think that Denver's schedule, when we talk about just the overall aspect, they're going to face the AFC West, which we all know is always tough. They're going to face the AFC East, which right now on paper is tough. The NFC North has some tough teams in it. There's going to also some question marks there. But you also have some other games you got to take care of business of. And I think that in the month of December alone, Denver has a stretch in December, AP. They have 3 straight road games in December, and that's tough, right? First one's going to be at Houston. And I know everyone's like, oh, that's right. That Houston game's going to be a W. We don't know that. Look, you got a brand-new quarterback in the mix, C.J. Stroud. You get Will Anderson Jr. You got D'Amico Ryan, so I think he's going to make a tremendous difference for the Texans. Houston's going to be tough, I think. And then you have the Chargers. You have your first game against the Chargers this season, and then guess what? You're on the road at Detroit. You tell me Detroit's going to be an easy game? No, that Dan Campbell-led team's going to be tough. They should have made the playoffs last year. It's a joke that they didn't get in. And then you close out the season, Bill Belichick and company coming to town. Always a tough game. Bill is always going to have his team prepared. Yes, Christmas Eve.
Yeah, so the Broncos have themselves 4 primetime games for now. We'll see if that, maybe more, maybe less, depending on how things shake out over the course of the year.
The Lions game and the Raiders game have an opportunity to be flexed.
Right, so right now the 4 primetime games that are currently on the slate.
But I was told they're going to have 0.
People love to chat, right? Week 6, first up against the defending champion Kansas City Chiefs. That'll be on Thursday Night Football. Week 10 on Monday Night Football, a cold weather game on the road in Buffalo.
I hope it's not cold in November in Buffalo.
Yeah, you might. You're going to have to try some chicken wings when you're out there.
I'm excited to go.
Some real
I need Kip
cheese.
to come with me on one of these trips.
We should definitely
He
play
can definitely pay for himself.
So back-to-back weeks on primetime. Week 10, Buffalo on the road, and then at home in Week 11 against the Minnesota Vikings. And then, as you alluded to, the final pre-scheduled primetime game is Week 16 against the New England Patriots. So some fun games, some fun matchups. But let's take a look here at the schedule as a whole. We don't got to win-loss. We don't got to do anything along those lines just now. But, some interesting games, a couple layups, a couple difficult ones, but they open up the season. I love this. Against their arch rival, Las Vegas Raiders.
Yeah.
At home, September the 10th.
Yeah, going to be a tough one because, here's the thing I want to pinpoint too, right? You mentioned the prime thing. I want to talk about the AFC West for a minute. Denver, in the last couple of seasons, Denver's always played Kansas City toward the end of the season, right? Now you literally play the Chiefs twice in the span of 3 weeks in the first half of the season.
Do you like that?
Kind of.
Is there an advantage to that or a disadvantage?
I think it raises the stakes a little bit, especially toward the end of the season, right?
I like those high-intensity games.
Division record, that matters for tiebreakers.
Because here's the other thing, though. A win in 1 or 2 of those games, I think, sparks momentum. Right? Versus
Denver went 1-5 in the AFC West last year.
Look at the last 2 years, or the last year, the 2 games from last season. They both took place in the second half of the schedule, if I remember correctly. And by the time those games came around, there was
nothing.
There was no juice.
There was no Denver wasn't going to make the playoffs by the time they played.
Right.
But I will say this, you play 3 AFC West division games in the first half of your season, then you're going to play the other ones in the second half. That's going to be tough, and it makes everything meaningful, right? Because you open up against the Raiders week 1, great. Usually it's a primetime game. Usually it's Monday Night Football. It's not. It's going to be 2:25 p.m. Mountain Time kickoff, but it's a rematch from last year. And I want to pinpoint this about the AFC West. Everyone says, oh, Denver can't compete. Danny, what do we see? Yeah, Denver went 5-12 last year. They went 1-5 in the AFC West. but they were competitive. They were in every
Mm-hmm.
single one of those games. It'd be a different conversation if they were being blown out by the Chiefs. Now that first game was 27-0 until they stormed back furiously, right? That could have been a blowout. But Denver can't compete with the Chiefs. They can't compete with the Chargers. They can't compete with the Raiders. They haven't beaten the Raiders, but they can compete with them.
Yep.
They haven't beaten the Chiefs, but they've competed with them as of late. So for me, it's like, hey, how much of a difference will Sean Payton make for this team in comparison to last year? I think it's huge. And look, if Russell Wilson plays to the magnitude we know that he can, and Sean Payton's offense is helping set that up, I absolutely think that Denver will snap the streak against Kansas City this year.
Yeah, and we'll keep an eye on that, as that game gets closer. Obviously, October 12th is the first matchup against the Kansas City Chiefs. But kind of, to the point that I made about momentum, I'm looking at this, and I know I just started out by saying we're not going to go game-by-game win-loss, but to me, there's no reason this team should not start out 2-0. Week 1 against the Raiders at home, followed up by a Week 2 matchup at home against the Washington Commanders.
You know me.
You should beat the Commanders.
You know me. I don't like getting ahead and trying to, predict games.
But on paper, quarterback matchups,
still going to be tough.
It's going to be tough. No, absolutely.
Everything's tough.
But I would hope that if you bring in Sean Payton, you reinvent the wheel with Russell Wilson. You've got this offense. Because the Raiders, I think they're going to take maybe a little bit of a step back with Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't.
It's possible.
They're
yeah.
a dysfunctional team.
Well,
You know what
Josh
I see
Jacobs
here, though?
still hasn't signed his franchise tag tender, so I mean,
Great
there's a
point.
chance he sits out the season
You bring in
unless he wants to play on.
You bring in Sean Payton to provide structure, to provide discipline, to get this team on track. What is the common denominator with their first two opponents, the Raiders and the Washington Commanders? Dysfunction. If you're a functional team, you should be able to beat both of those teams. And then we move on to their first road game, in which should be a very good test, Week 3 on the road at Miami. That'll be a fun one.
Well, I mean, Week 3, that's going to be a tough one because, and look, the storyline's
That's going
kind
to
of
be hot.
Yeah, I'm excited to go to South
Sweaty,
Beach.
naughty.
I don't know. I'm going to be like, hopefully I get a hotel that's got, overlooks the beach and whatnot. I'm able to have sleep with the
I'm not going to try to spoil it for you, but the stadium is very far from any of that. It's in the middle of nowhere.
I know.
I've been there a
I hear
couple
it's a
times.
pain to get out of, to be honest with you.
It's awful.
We'll see how it goes. But
Is that where Rolling Loud was?
Yes. Great venue for a music festival. I don't know about great, but fun venue for a music festival. Yeah, it's in Miami Gardens, which is a lot different than like Miami.
But I think initially this is the schedule. You start off with 2 home games, then your next 2 games, 2 on the road. Then you go home against the Jets, which storylines write itself there. Former Broncos head coach Nathaniel Hackett, now the offensive coordinator for the New York Jets. New look quarterback Aaron Rodgers. The Jets were tough last year defensively, and they were looking for a guy besides the Mormon MILF hunter to put them on top at the quarterback position. Was last year in Green
Right.
Bay an anomaly for Aaron Rodgers, or is he really fallen off? And how bad of it was Nathaniel Hackett? Like, will that carry over to the Jets offense? Things like that. And then guess what? You're going to host the Green Bay Packers and the new look Jordan Love-led Packers at that point. And then you have obviously a home game against Kansas City before you have your bye week in Week 9. And then bam, after the bye, prime time
Buffalo!
on the road at Buffalo against Josh Allen, but also against Von Miller.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that.
Week 3
Is Von
against
gonna be
Bradley
healthy?
Chubb, Vic Fangio. Yeah, Von will be ready. But like Week 3, you're going to face former Broncos head coach Vic Fangio as the DC and Bradley Chubb. And it's tough. Like the final 6 games for Denver. I mean, honestly, the second half of the season is going to be tough because you got Buffalo, Minnesota, who was a playoff team last year, Cleveland, who knows what the hell they'll look like. Then you have Houston on the road, L.A., Detroit, and then you close out the season, your final 3 games, New England at home, the Chargers at home, and then you close out the season at the Las Vegas Raiders. It's a tough schedule, and it's like everyone, like I get asked to come on these shows. What's your record prediction? Can we not do that? Like, I hate that. It's just cheap way. It's a cheap way to get clicks. It's cheap content. I don't like predicting the schedule, man, because so many things change. Like AP, people don't realize. Okay, hey, when the Broncos first play, let's say Kansas City in Week 6, are there any key players that got injured in Weeks 1 through 5 that are out for a significant time? Like, what are the circumstances that could impact that? I hate getting into predict this. No, like, hey, week by week. You don't see teams, you don't see players going and say, okay, this is a win, this is a win. You can't do that. And I know it's a fan exercise. I'm not pooping on that for you, but it's like for me, I don't like answering those questions because I think it's disingenuous to the game. I don't like predicting.
There's so
games
much that
out.
goes on between now and the start of the season.
Yes.
And there's a lot that goes on from Week 1 to Week 17.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. Why in the Broncos schedule are there a couple of games there at the end that have flex dates next to them? Let me. Where did it go?
Well,
here?
because of
Well,
potential playoff implications.
So, but so I've never seen this on the schedule.
So-
Like, Detroit week 15, it says December 16th or 17th.
yes,
and
so
then week
it could be-
18
that's when the schedule for the NFL starts to allow like Saturday
Okay.
night football. So basically,
Post college football.
yeah. So
That makes sense.
if it's a Saturday night game, more than likely it'll be on the NFL Network. If that's the case, so Denver could still play some more primetime games. They have